y'all are not the only ones dealing with this. So if you look on here, this sort of royal blue and then almost like a dark black, those are all states that have adopted at least the 2009 IECC. So there's a lot of states going through this process right now along with you. Louisiana just, as of January 1st as well, updated their code. And then Texas, even though Texas shows that it's not updated, actually most jurisdictions are on the 2009 IECC. So, mandatory code. It says that all states or counties shall adopt the Arkansas Energy Code prior to December 31st, 2014. So that means that the states or the jurisdictions need to adopt it. Now,
do contractors, since they are licensed by the state, are they required to comply with this code even though the city has not adopted it? I think yes.
Yes.
Also. So it doesn't really matter whether the city's adopted or not. The contractors are supposed to be, are by law have to do it anyway.
Right. There's a lot of jurisdictions out there that just, they don't have building departments. They're too small, or they don't have enough construction going on. And builders are still legally obligated to meet the code regardless of what the enforcement is in that area.
Yes, you guys can get more restrictive, and the state can do whatever they want. They don't have to follow the model code. So when they exclude certain items, that's fine. That's the time, if you want to get things out of it, that's the time to do it. That's one of the reasons we have that addendum the state has adopted with changes. We are not in line by line compliance. And Lauren, did you want to talk about that a little bit, or are you going to do that later, where you'll see two different references here, one of them to the 2014 Arkansas Energy Code and then the other to the 2009 IECC. And you're going to go, well, wait a minute, which one do I use? Well, both. Because we're under the 2009 IECC with amendments. So we are amended. So there's a secondary document if you've got your, I want to use Ron's code book over here. If you've got this, there is also an amendment that the state has put out that changes some of it.
That sort of thing, but we are, they don't give us any information on the heat and air systems or electrical or insulation.
Yep.
So that's not part of the plan review, and again, most cities don't.
That's right.
Yep.
If they do anything, it's just to make sure that the house is placed on the lot properly, as far as setbacks and
Yes.
and that sort of thing, and generally that's it.
And I'm not surprised. And I'm not surprised to hear that.
No, I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
A lot
Yeah.
of states, but so now that this code requires a manual J, my understanding, is that correct?
So, funny you should ask that. I'm going to put that on here, Manual J. We will definitely talk about that.
So we would, as our construction documents as they present, we would now, as of last week, require a manual J calculation for that.
That wasn't opted out as an amendment?
Oh, no, well, let's
Well, there's a little...
I thought it was.
There's a glitch.
There's a glitch. There is a glitch, and we will get to the glitch. We will definitely get to the glitch. So, in the 2009 IECC, I'm going to pull up my code book. And actually, if y'all look, so that's one thing to note in here that I have not noted yet, but this is a really good time to do it. So y'all were looking at the checklist. Flip to the next page after your checklist. On there, you will see code comparison. So for each item on that checklist, it's going to tell you exactly where it is in the code.
Yeah, that's page 19.
Yeah, page 19. So as far as the Manual J reference goes, your code reference that you're going to go look at is 2009 IECC 403.6 equipment sizing. That has not been crossed out in Arkansas amendments. 403.6, if you could read that reference to us. In the code.
In the code.
In the code.
7.
Equipment sizing, in parentheses, mandatory. Heating and cooling equipment shall be sized in accordance with section M of 1401.3 of the International Residential Code.
So, do y'all adopt the International Residential Code?
Don't adopt the M section. They
Yeah.
have deleted
Yeah,
the
they
M
read it,
section
yeah.
for our Arkansas mechanical code.
Right, so they've replaced that with the Arkansas Mechanical Code. So when you go to the Arkansas Mechanical Code, that reference does not exist. So it's a little bit of a glitch right now that was not factored into the code process. The idea was that this would be something that would be required. One of the things that is in the Arkansas Mechanical Code that I was really interested to discover is that Manual D is required. And it's stated in there that Manual D or equivalent is required in the Arkansas Mechanical Code.
That's the duct design.
Yes. In order to do a duct design, what do you have to do?
You have to do a room by room manual
CF,
check.
yeah.
Yes, or equivalent.
You're
Yeah.
basically seeing what CFN, what you have to meet the demand of what CFN has to be in that room, if it's 12 by 12, 9 by 5, or whatever it may be. Determines the size of that opening is going to be determined by, well, actually a hood showing you what CFN is probably the best practice, but you
Right.
can actually show how your takeoffs from your trunk line and the design and determine whether or not you're going to get the proper CFN.
Yeah,
So if it requires a D, then it requires
You
Manual J to get to the D.
Right. In order to be able to do the duct design, you have to know the size of your equipment. And to properly size your equipment, you have to do ACA Manual J or some sort of equivalent form of that. The problem is that the reference isn't clear enough at this point to make it easy for you guys to say, look at it's right here, y'all have to do it. So, yeah.
We talked about this yesterday afternoon. There's a manual J room by room, or an ASHRAE room by room, not just a block load.
Right.
You gotta know how many BTUs to put in every room in the house, not just the whole house.
When you go through the whole thing of looking of what's required in the code, it's pretty much inferred that you're going to have to do a room by room Manual J.
So, cut to the chase, if I am doing a review on a residential building permit, am I requiring that they show me calculations for this house, for the mechanical?
So, if you want to,
No, I mean, do I have
the
to?
code?
do you have to?
What does the code require?
So, the code is really good at not telling you what has to be shown to the code official. You'll notice that when it says a visual inspection, it doesn't say who has to do the visual inspection. It is up to the jurisdictions. Sometimes it comes down at the state level as far as if it needs to be shown to the code official. Let's get into the specific changes now. We're going to talk about framing, air sealing, so on. Okay, so framing. For the builders, this gets into a little bit more planning than perhaps they're used to. Some examples have already been highlighted, which is, insulation behind the tubs, that type of thing. And then you get into the framing and then the actual sealing. So first of all, the code specifically states that you need to do a complete air barrier in the house. So the building envelope contains a complete continuous air barrier and then a complete thermal barrier. It needs to be clearly defined and it needs to be complete in order to protect that insulation. And the insulation needs to be in contact with that air barrier. These are all of the things that get into the specifics of air sealing. So the air sealing as far as making sure that you have that continuous air barrier, actually air barriers. So when we're talking about the air barrier, it needs to be defined. Some people use the drywall as that air barrier and sealing everything up. Some people don't rely on the drywall, so they'll seal any penetrations or any holes going through the floor, going through the walls, that type of stuff. What we sort of advocate for in here is the belt and suspenders approach, which is make sure you're sealing all your penetrations. Going out through the house, you're not going to see any daylight. Then install your insulation and then your drywall. And then the drywall, if the drywall happens to fail in a certain point, you've got that backup behind. But the code does specify certain places that need to be sealed regardless of where your specific air barrier is. And that's like sealing penetrations and that sort of thing.
Let's touch on foam for just a second. If you're doing closed cell foam, a lot of times you're going to see the foam guys in a 3.5 inch stud cavity put in 3 inches of foam, and you've got an inch between that and the air barrier. It's not touching. If it is closed cell foam, you can count the foam as the insulation and the air barrier, one and the same. If it's open cell foam, you need it to be about 3 inches thick. There's an exact number, but it's about that before you can start to count it as an air barrier. So if you see open foam, foam, you want it shaved off clean with the front of that, typically, of that stud cavity, because in a 2x4 wall, it's going to take that to get you an R13 anyway, because it's going to be the same R value as cellulose. But you get in that closed cell, it's got half again as much R value, so you'll usually have a gap between the foam and the sheetrock. So, and the other thing I'd like to say about that is we're sealing. If you've got houses going up with foam, we're building tight as a cold drink cooler. I mean, we're talking airtight. I tested one in Little Rock, 7 times tighter than ASHRAE says is safe. No mechanical ventilation. 12 tons of air conditioning. It needed 3.5 because old school, 400. So, what I'm saying, if there's one kind of house that you might want to say, hey, why don't we blower door test this and see how tight it is, it's going to be a foam house. And if it reaches a certain tightness, you are going to want mechanical ventilation for health and safety, period.
So we've got a section of a house here. We've got a garage. We've got some bedrooms and stuff. So where is the air barrier and thermal barrier going to be in this house? So you can see here where the blue drawing is. So we know that, this is going to be the top of that air barrier. The walls right here, we want to seal in between the garage so we don't have any air coming in from there because this is unconditioned space. That floor, if we have an unvented crawl space down there, you want to make sure that floor is sealed up and the walls. So that's what we're sort of looking for in here is that when you sort of trace that boundary of where the heating and cooling is going, is that we're seeing something continuous there. That's both the continuous air barrier and insulation as well. Frame corners and headers to allow for insulation installation. So this is something that I've talked with both code officials and builders about, and they really don't like this requirement because it does change the way that framers frame. Specifically, we're talking about, as you can see here, you can get some insulation back behind there. That's the goal of the code. But this is something that often creates a lot of frustration and irritation because how do you fix it once it's in place? Yeah. Difficult at best.
The problem is in framing inspection, you're not going to look at a framing inspection until notches and bores and everything's been done for plumbing, electrical, and all.
Yep.
So it's framed.
Yep. Yeah, they're not taking anything down at that point. But yeah, again, it's really hard to fix framing. You can't really do it at that point. So again, locating these places on the plans, gets into the planning for the builders, places that y'all need to look at. So places, behind tubs, fireplaces, knee walls, that sort of thing. They need to make sure that there's something that's going to hold that insulation in place. Essentially that we're looking sort of at 6 sides to make sure that the insulation is not falling out, because it needs to maintain continuous contact with that air barrier. And then something to hold that insulation in place. They give exceptions as far as the floor and ceiling goes. So with the floor, you just have to have some sort of like stave or something that permanently supports it. You don't actually have to have like an air barrier that keeps it in there. Same thing with up in the attic. They're not worried about that 6th side up there. They're like, just put the insulation. It's going to rest on the drywall. You know, you can see that there's gonna have to be some sort of knee wall in this situation. So in that case, you'd wanna be looking for making sure that they have some sort of way to keep that insulation in those knee walls.
Laura,
They
the
call
other
it
thing,
garage.
please interrupt there. When you walk in in the garage and you look up at that upstairs bonus room right there, you want to see that insulation in the floor pushed up in the joist, up to the touching the floor. We tend to staple it to the underside and it leaves an air gap between our air barrier and the insulation.
No.
So you want to make that, you get that
We don't take
snugged
the
up,
lips and staple it
always
to
snug
the
it up.
other side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't staple it.